Well, good morning. It's really, really good to be with you all again and to see so many here during holiday season. Thank you for choosing to come today. Firstly, if you're a member, thank you for coming. You are most welcome. All too often we put the guests first, don't we? But members, thank you for coming to church today. And guests, it is so good to see you here. Thank you for choosing Swan Valley to come and worship this morning. And I pray that as we mix together as God's church family for today, that you'll be blessed and that you will see Jesus a little more clearly in the word that we speak and in the fellowship that we have together. You're most welcome to stay back and have a soup and have lunch afterwards with us. It gives me a chance to have a chat with you and gives us all a chance to just relax and spend time in the beauty of God's family together. That song before that you organised, Braden there, Goodness of God, pretty powerful, hey? Good singing, good choir, good music, touches the heart and makes you realise that we are here for God's goodness. But as I sat there watching it, I had a little bit of an appreciation for our tech crew at the back there, our PA audio-visual guys. We all have a little crack at them and look at them and give them the stare when something's going wrong. But hey, 99.9% of the time they get it right and they do a great job. And what a blessing to have such clarity and such a great ministry of that DVD clip brought to us by our team. There are so many things that they do behind the scenes that you guys just don't see. I see when I come in during the week, I see cars here parked and I look into the lights are on and someone's here checking out the PA desk and just going over stuff and loading the computer. And I just want to just give a big shout this morning to our audio-visual PA crew. We couldn't do church without you guys. We really couldn't. And the days are really moving that we rely so much on technology. And these guys are up on it. They're having a crack all the time at new things, and what a blessing they are. New series. It's the 6th of January, first of the new quarter, and we have a new series. And I've titled it Living the Name. We're going to start going through the book of Acts, and chapter by chapter, verse by verse. We're looking at the church that got it right. The church that, as I said in the book of Acts, turned the world upside down. And in fact, in chapter 4, it says they asked the question why they did what they did. And they said, because of Jesus, we just couldn't keep our mouths shut. Now, with that type of enthusiasm, we have to emulate that. We've got to catch that vibe and catch what they did. Because I don't want my lifetime as a Christian to be a waste in the world. I want to see the world change because of my presence here. And so I'm going to launch into the series. I'm not doing chapter 1, that's for next week. I'm doing an overview and a bit of a transition from the Gospels into the book of Acts this morning. And it's centred around the theme of the quarter, which is living the name. Of course, what name? Living the name of Jesus Christ in your life every day. That's what the book of Acts is all about. They lived it day in, day out. And as we transition from Matthew, Mark, Luke and John into Acts, the book of Acts, where we see Jesus in the Gospels, Jesus' 3.5-year ministry, and then come to the end of John, and we find that we then move into Acts. And we see that Jesus goes back to heaven and he leaves the 3.5-year ministry that he did on earth to 12 men. And we see that they took it to the world. And that's what we're looking at. What came from Jesus' life into the book of Acts? 5 things. And I think that today that we could take it as 5 ways to be Christ-like. 1, they were like Christ in his mission. 2, they were like Christ in his service. 3, they were like Christ in the incarnation. 4, they were like Christ in his love. 5, they were like Christ in his endurance. And as we go into the lives of some of these characters in the book of Acts, we're going to see these 5 themes come out. And I believe that as we endeavour to be Acts chapter 2, the second book of Acts repeated here in 2024, in our own lives, in our families, in our church, these points would do well to be exhibited in our lives. 1, like Christ in mission. 2, like Christ in his service. 3, like Christ in the incarnation. 4, like Christ in his love. 5, like Christ in endurance. In transitioning from the Gospels to Acts, how did Jesus do it? How did Jesus leave it? Now, we all know that his last words were the gospel commission, go into all the world and preach the gospel. But before the cross, what was his final message? It's something that I believe that we can sometimes miss. It's something that we at times can tack onto an ordinance service, onto the Lord's Supper, and miss the most important message Jesus wanted to give his church. The most important message that Jesus wanted to give his church wasn't just a nice drink of grape juice and a nice bit of bread, bit of leavened bread, cooked so lovingly by our deaconesses. Much, much more than that. Come with me. John chapter 13 and verses 1 to 17. We will read it through in one sitting. I love reading scripture, and we'll read it through, and then I'll unpack that during the course of my sermon. Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come, that he should depart from the world unto the Father, having loved his own which were in the world, he loved them unto the end. And supper being ended, the devil having now put into his heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hand, and that he was come from God and went to God, he riseth from the supper, and he laid aside his garments and took a towel and girded himself. And after that he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel wherewith he was girded. Then cometh he to Simon Peter, and Peter said to him, Lord, dost thou wash my feet? Jesus answered and said to him, What I do that thou knowest not now, but thou shalt know hereafter. Peter said to him, Thou shalt never wash my feet. Jesus answered him, If I wash thee not, thou hast no part with me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Jesus said to him, He that is washed need not save to wash his feet, but he that is clean every whit, and ye are clean, but not all. For he who should not betray him, therefore, said he, Ye are not all clean. So after he had washed their feet, and had taken his garments, and was set down, he said to them, Do you know what I've done to you? You call me Master and Lord, and you say, Well, for so I am. If then your Lord and Master have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that ye should do as I have done to you. Verily, verily, I say to you, the servant is not greater than his Lord. Neither he that sent is greater than he that sent him. If you know these things, happy are ye if you do them. This passage we just read is Jesus' final farewell passage, his final farewell message. And I wonder if you knew that you were saying goodbye to someone and you knew you may not see them again, you would make sure that your words were measured. You'd make sure that what you did was meaningful because you wanted to leave an impression on people that you love. Jesus gives the last and most important instructions here amongst these passages. And I think that the most important thing that Jesus is saying here in this passage we just read in John 13 is that your aim, your ideal, your New Year's resolution, the top of the pile of you being someone like Christ has to be a servant. Be a servant. You see, Jesus was most like his Father in the hidden. We are most like Christ, not here in my Sabbath dress, here in the pulpit, in church on Sabbath morning. We are most like Christ in the hidden. And yet we so often don't seek that. The disciples were so self-thinking, so full of pride, that they were looking around the room saying, not me, not me, not me, not me. And all too often, without meaning it, we can sit in the same seats they were sitting. And pride and me first attitude takes away the servanthood that we so often have ambitions for. There was only one person humble enough in that room that evening to wash feet. That was Jesus. No one else. No one else. Jesus kneels down at the feet of one of his followers. Towel tucked in to his belt. He kneels down with the bowl and says, I want to do the menial lowest task for you this evening. Big idea today, what am I preaching on this morning, is be like Jesus, serve others. Be like Jesus, serve others. John 13:15, we read the verse, and I want to just remind us of it now in John 13 verse 15. But I have given you an example that you should do as I have done for you. All too often we think, oh, that means that we do the foot washing. I want to take nothing away from that beautiful little ordinance we have as a part of our communion. But sometimes do we rush past because, Jesus, I can go and sail to New Guinea and preach for you. Jesus, I can go out to the desert and take clothing out there to the people for you. I can do all those big flashy things, but hey, when you ask me to serve my brothers, when you ask me to serve my wife, when you ask me to serve my kids, when you ask me to serve the member in the church that's not very nice to me, I can't do that. And Jesus is saying, if you want to be like me, serve. If you want to be like me, imitate me, says Jesus. Imitate me. Do as I did. In about 12 hours' time, Jesus was going to die on the cross. And he must have had his head in all sorts of places in his humanness. He must have been, wondering, am I leaving my church to this mob? And one guy's going to betray me. And these guys are thinking about who's going to be number one in my kingdom. And they're arguing and bickering. They're looking at each other. They won't even wash feet. No. Nothing of that is recorded in this passage about Jesus. It says that just before he died on the cross, the most important thing on his mind, the most important message he wanted to give to his church, that would be his church in the years afterwards, was servanthood. If you want to be my people, imitate me. And serving was on Jesus' mind at this time. I've got 2 points this morning, 2 major points. One is, Jesus washed his disciples' feet because he loved them. Jesus washed his disciples' feet simply because he loved them. even though they were doing all these various things in their mind, and one was in a backstabbing frame of mind too, and had called people to come and help him do his deeds he wanted to do to Jesus. Another one was going to deny Jesus a few hours later. Jesus loved them. Jesus loved them. And in John 13, verse 34 and 35, we see an amazing passage in the same chapter we're in. A new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another as I have loved you. That you love one another. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if you have love for one another. That passage is tacked here with the foot washing serving illustration of Jesus. I think it sums up what foot washing is all about. Love one another. By this, the world will know that you are Christian. By this, the world will know that you are my disciples. By this, the world will know that you love me if you're loving one another. If you're loving one another. That's the proof. That's the bottom line. That's the evidence. You know, I find this next point hard. Because, as you know, I love serving, and I know I need to follow where God wants me to do, but sometimes I meet some not very nice people. And one lady, she just frustrates me, or used to. And I got to see her around Guildford. You might see her too if you're around Guildford. She's got a bike, and she's got one of those carts that you put babies in. I only got to see the other day, there's no baby in that cart, or no goods, it's 2 dogs. And she comes around, she actually told me yesterday that she rides her bike from Redcliffe across the bridge and across over to where we are at Bidland Mills. And I had seen her around in the last year or two, but whenever I went to cross I was in a hurry to go there. Whenever I go across, she'd go up to the crosswalk, press the button and turn the lights before I could get through. And here she goes slowly across on her bike, slowly across with this carriage behind. And I was judging her because I was in the car wanting to get going. And whenever I'm going to turn a corner, she's going to cut across that corner. And so I got to know her, and I had not very good feelings about her. And anyhow, I'm there yesterday. There's no street doctor, and she only started coming to get food for the last 3 or 4 weeks. And she comes in, it's all quiet, and she comes in and she says, "Oh, I'm glad you're here." And she said, "I rely so much on you for food." And I said, "No worries, great to see you. Can I make you up 3 or 4 containers?" "Oh, yes, please." And she chose what she wanted. And the dogs got out and had a run around, and so I flicked them a little bit of a sausage each, and they then in turn liked me, and it was great. And she stopped on the bike. She came back and said, "Can I have another one?" I said, "Yeah." So I served another one, and she said, "I'll eat that, yeah." And while she ate, she turned to me and she said, "Why do you do this?" And lucky my automation kicked in, because I love people like you. And I thought, what am I saying? And then she said, "I've checked you out. You're a pastor, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "You're a 7-day pastor?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Do you have a church?" I said, "Yeah, I've got 2. I've got one in Swan Valley, and I've got one in Kundula." She said, "I'm a 7-day." I said, "What?" She said, "Yeah." She said, "I haven't been to church since I was a teenager." She said, "I used to go to Perth Church." And she said, "There was a guy very much like you, used to be a pastor there. I said, it was me. And anyhow, I was very nice with her, and I said, it's just great chatting, and we chatted for a little while longer. Then finally, after a while, she said, the dog's in the cart, and the obedient little things all hopped in the cart. The one little looked like Pomeranian, and the other's a little scruffy little thing. And they all hopped in the cart, and off she pedalled. Away she went. And you know what? I'm looking forward to seeing her next Wednesday. You just never ever know. I judged her for being annoyance to me when I'm doing God's work. God judged me and said, Loren, I have a lesson for you to learn. But how often are we like that? And when Jesus said, love as I have loved you, love tells the world that you're a Christian. Love tells the world that you're following me. It also means to love the unlovable. It also tells Loren Pratt that I have to love this lady. I have to love the unlovable, those that annoy me. Judas was there that night. Judas was there in that room. And he received the most humble demonstration of love he could ever find when Jesus took the towel and washed his feet. In those motions of Jesus, he saw the heart of love that Jesus had for all those he loved. Sometimes we think our love for others should be for those who like us and not those that we don't like or those that don't like us. And sometimes we, in our judgmental mood, put those lines in place there. Sometimes we think that our love for each other should be just those in the room here, those in the church here. And we think that, hey, I can love each other, but when Jesus calls me to love my family, no. When he calls me to love my relatives, no. When he calls me to love those out in the world, no. And sometimes our love for each other just stops here at the door. And our love for each other comes to church Sabbath morning at about 9:30 in the morning and stays till about 12:30, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then our love stops. Sometimes our love is just for those in this room. Sometimes we can't love those out the other side of the door, or vice versa. We love those outside the door, but we can't love those in the church. With Jesus, he has no discrimination. When he prays a prayer, I pray that there'll be one. That was for his church and for those who are going to come to his church. Jesus sets the example that when we love one another, we love all. When we love one another, we love the unlovable. And when we love the unlovable, it doesn't just stop at the church door. Jesus washed the feet of Judas too. Jesus washed the feet of Judas too. Jesus here reminds us of a very important point. He reminds us that we are called to serve all people, the lovely and the unlovely, the lonely and the friendly, the not so friendly as well. When Jesus calls us to serve, he says we can't discriminate. It's not our job to pick who we love and who we don't love. And yet all too often we think it is. I ask you the question, I ask myself the question, when was the last time you washed the feet of someone like Judas? When was the last time you washed the feet of someone like Judas? Mother Teresa, we all have heard of her. We love to have her quotes on our calendars and our diaries and books like that. She was in Phoenix in 1989 to open an orphanage there, a home for the poor. And during the brief visit, she was interviewed by KTAR Radio, the biggest radio station in town. And in a private moment, the announcer asked Mother Teresa if there was anything he could do for her. And he was expecting her to request a contribution or donation to the orphanage to help raise money for this new home. Instead, she replied, "Yes, there is something you can do for me. Yes, there is. Find someone that no one loves and love them. Find someone that no one loves and love them." 1, Jesus washed the disciples' feet because he loved them. 2, Jesus washed the disciples' feet because he was focused on the needs of others. When you come to the book of Acts, as we're going to go through the next few weeks, you'll notice that his disciples did miracles, did wonders, did signs, did great things because they loved the people that they were serving. They courted off Jesus. You'll find that the disciples, they met needs. You'll find people like Dorcas. You'll find Paul and Peter and others meeting needs of people. You'll find them in prayer, focused on others, not themselves, because they courted off Jesus. They courted off Jesus. All too often today, we look out for number one. And we're taught it from birth, really. When a baby first wants something, wants food or wants a nappy changed, it'll cry to its mother. And we go on with that. Like if a dad's focusing attention on a little brother, big sister comes over because she's jealous, wants to focus on her as well. And right all through our lives, we find this me focus centred on me can very easily come into our lives, come into our hearts, because it's a part of sin. It's a part of the world we're in. And we're always looking out for number one. It was true in the disciples' time here in the upper room when they said, "Not me, not me, not me." Then Jesus grabbed the towel. It's true today in our lives too. We're in a not me, not me, not me world when Jesus is wanting us to serve someone. John 13 verse 3. John 13 and verse 3, we find what Jesus knew. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things in his hands and that he was come from God and went to God. John 13:3, we read that before. We just reminded that because here's my point. Jesus knew that he was King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Jesus knew his home was in heaven, and yet he still took on the role of a servant. It's been said that humility is not thinking meanly of yourself. It's not thinking of yourself at all. Humility is not thinking meanly of yourself. It's not thinking of yourself at all. It's never been money that gives people worth. It's never been education that gives people worth. It's never been connections that give people worth. Only Jesus gives people value and worth to their lives. And from that day on, when people meet Jesus, they don't care what task you give them as long as it pleases the heart of Jesus. And that's what a servant does. Please the heart of Jesus. Our identity, our worth cannot be in others. Our identity, our worth cannot be in things. Our home has to be in Jesus. Our raison d'etre has to be in Jesus. Our all in all, our everything has to be in Jesus. He has to be our identity. And all our serving flows from our identity in Jesus. Sometimes we don't serve because it's below my dignity to serve that person. Husbands this morning, husbands in the audience here, is there anything below your dignity to serve your wife? That's where it really meets the road. They're the people you know so well, the people you spend time with so much. And I believe that if we're going to be servants, husbands and men, we have to start with serving our wives. Women, wives, is there anything in your personal dignity that prevents you from serving your husband? That's where it meets the road. That's where it's hard. And that's where Jesus is asking us to be servants. After all, when he took the towel, he took it to serve those that were closest to him on earth. And our wives, our husbands, are the closest to us on earth. Parents, mums and dads, is there anything in your dignity that is stopping you from serving your children and serving their needs? Or do we have children because they're there to serve us? Children and young people, is there anything in your dignity that is stopping you from serving your mum and dad? And grandparents, you don't miss out either. You know what I'm saying? If there is anything stopping you from doing this, whether you're husbands, wives, parents, children, grandies, if there's anything stopping you from doing this, then you have not understood this message and you have not understood the act of Jesus. Jesus took the towel and he asked us to take the towel too. Imagine what kind of impact this church would have if we took the towel and washed feet. The effect would be absolutely enormous if we as members said, our job is to take the towel and just wash feet. People are searching for something that is real out in the world today. They really are. And the world is changing so quickly, and they're wanting something different than their greedy, dying world. They are receptive if we took the towel and washed feet. It's time for God's church to stand up and show the world the true nature of Jesus. It's time for God's church to stand up and adopt the role of servanthood, modelled for us by Jesus in his last act to his disciples. In his last act before he let them loose on the world. If we are to follow Jesus, that's to be our act as well. We don't add anything to God's kingdom by involving ourselves in political power. We don't add anything to God's kingdom by just preaching words. Just preaching words will not win people's hearts, because in the process of just using words, we become pushy like everyone else. Political power and words don't win the world anymore. The church can also be filled with a spirit of competition like there was in the upper room. It can also be filled with the spirit of criticism of other believers, as it was in the upper room. What if we just truly served church? What if we just truly churched? We are good at growing in knowledge, but we're not so good at growing in grace. We are good at growing in knowledge, but we're not so good at growing in grace. Literal foot washing is not done these days. We can't go out into the suburbs around here and into the streets of Midland with bowls and towels. That's not what's done anymore. We're past that custom. But just maybe there's a modern day towel that we need to use. Just maybe you might have a neighbour who's in need, who might need some help. There's a room full of food behind here. All you've got to do is ask the deaconesses and you can offer them a food parcel and say, we love you, we want to serve you. Just maybe you have a co-worker that needs help with something on the job. Just maybe you could pay the school fees for a struggling family. I'm here because someone did that. My nana was absolutely poor and someone paid my mum through Adventist private school. I thank God for that. That lady and husband don't know that mum had 6 of us kids, 4 of us boys are ministers. We don't know what can happen from our little acts of servanthood. We could maybe babysit that baby for that single mum who's absolutely struggling to meet each day. We can visit someone who's sick. We can give clothes to someone who needs it. And all the while doing these things, know that we are doing the servant heart of Jesus. And knowing that we are furthering the mission of the church and God's kingdom. We today, like the disciples that night, desperately need a lesson in humility. We today, like the disciples that night, desperately need a lesson in humility. God is not looking for more stars. God is not looking for more stars. He is looking for more servants. He's looking for more servants. And when he looks to you, when he looks to me, can he find a servant? I preached my sermon. It's a transition from the Gospels to the book of Acts and opening up the start for a wonderful series we're going to have on the book of Acts where we see the church on fire. But what about you? Have you heard the message? And what are you going to do about it today and over the coming quarter? Maybe this story might help you. When Julius Caesar landed on the shores of Britain during the 1st century with a legion of Roman soldiers, he took a bold and decisive stand to ensure the commitment of his soldiers. He got them all together and he marched them up to the cliffs of Dover. And there they looked out over the sea and they saw all the ships that they had travelled across the English Channel on fire. He burnt them all. Caesar had burned the ships, eliminating the possibility of retreat. That army turned around and with a new vitality, a new sense of urgency, conquered Britain for Julius Caesar's empire. My friends, Swan Valley Church, as we stand on the first Sabbath of the new year when most make New Year's resolutions, what's keeping you from living the name of Jesus today? What's keeping you from living the name of Jesus today? We need to stop making excuses. We need to burn whatever ships are keeping us from looking back. Burn those ships. And I want to challenge you to come with me and let's plough forward new ground for the glory of God. My big idea this morning has been, be like Jesus, serve others. Be like Jesus, serve others. May God bless us as we look at his church serving others through the book of Acts over the next quarter.